terrible, listless boredom of Sunday afternoons. I love Sunday afternoons. Ian Ground is a serial lecturer. You're also a senior lecturer in philosophy at Sunderland University. Kill me now, Ian Ground. Do you want to live forever?
Hi, Jonathan. Happy New Year to you. I think it's an interesting question, isn't it? If you ask me on any day, do I want to be alive the next day? The answer is almost certainly yes. But if you put it the other way around and say, do I want to live to be not just 100, but 1,000 or 3,000 years old? Ooh, much more puzzling. I'm not quite sure I even know what it means for it to be me to be 1,000 years old.
I think it will be fine, providing you can have the faculties you had when you were fit and healthy and gorgeous at 22.
Well, people say that. That means you're kind of stuck in a rut, as it were.
That's all right.
It may be a rather pleasant rut, but I think that even that rut will get a bit tedious after not just another extra decade or two, which we're perhaps all in favour of, but if as some people want to say, we can abolish death altogether, then it's a different proposition. Then people are talking about people living to 1,000 years or some period like that. I think we just don't know enough about human psychology to be able to make a judgment about that. We just don't know whether, as it were, people's psychological lives can extend that far. Whether they're not just becoming bored with being the person they are.
Why are we living so much longer now? I think there are 12,000 100-year-olds in the UK alone.
Well, I'm not a scientist. I'm a philosopher, so you'll have to ask the scientists that kind of question. I guess it's down to nutrition. One of the big differences, of course, is when we're talking about extending the lifespan, the differences we already have. So, a woman in Chelsea, for example, can expect to live to be 89 or thereabouts, whereas men in Glasgow can live only to be 71. Well, there's a big inequality that wants addressing just right there. Let alone, that's quite apart from all the no doubt fascinating work that scientists are doing on genetics and so forth.
It's bonkers, actually. I was talking to a friend of mine who's just reached 80, and he said, "Oh, it's so unfair." He said, "I'm 80, and a friend of ours recently went at 56."
Well, no one said life was going to be fair.
No, I suppose not. Is the secret, do you think, on this Greek island, the secret to longevity, eating nothing but mung beans and drinking pomegranate juice?
I have no idea. You have to ask a scientist about that. I'm interested in the question of what it means to think about abolishing death and the consequences there might be for society in which we all have much more extended lifespans. And one of the things that happens, I think, psychologically to people is they become much more conservative as they get older. They can become more resistant to change. It's often said that in science, you get new theories only when the old theorists die. And so a society in which everybody were much, much older might not be the kind of society you'd want to live in.
So, you being a philosophy lecturer, what would life be like if everybody lived to 1,000? I mean, society would have to be restructured, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, there's all sorts of, no doubt, kind of social and economic consequences of that. The people who are in favour of this say, oh, well, the same is true of the Industrial Revolution, that society can change and cope with change. Ooh, maybe. It looks like a bigger change than that to me. I think I think these people are kind of touchingly naive, however, about what it is to be a person and whether we can make sense of the idea of being the same person in 1,000 years' time. Either you're going to be just as you are now, in which case you're likely to be very bored, or you'll be something very, very different and interesting, in which case it's hard for me to identify with being that person, really.
Yeah, I mean,
you may as well be a different person, frankly.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, these are all just theories. I mean, let's face it, nobody knows what would happen and how society is going to develop in 1,000 years' time, do they?
No one knows that. That's true. On the whole, it tends to be worse, of course.
Yeah.
When we have a population that's already growing, having people being much older doesn't look like a really good place to start. Of course, we should say we're all in favour of making the ageing process as good as we can. Okay. For example, this great work goes on in Newcastle at the Institute for Aging on this theme, and we all make a contribution to that. I, for example, run a public programme called Explore, in which people of all ages get together and discuss all sorts of issues, and that's good for their mental health.
Do you think that this is going to be an upward trend now, that life expectancy gets higher and higher?
Well, the statistics certainly seem to point that way. Whether we get wiped out by other kinds of disasters, this is a question of our natural health, as it were. Whether there are issues to do with resources and food and economics that impact upon that, we don't know. But I think there's an awful number of very grand claims being made. I think it's interesting that we get this kind of claim being made and interest in this topic when the world has become much more unequal. There's a kind of super elite in the world now who think they can buy everything, and the one thing they can't buy at the minute seems to be much longer life. They have a lot in common with the ancient Egyptians, it seems to me. They'd be very willing to spend a great deal of money on an extra decade of life. Very important questions then about justice and inequality.
I'm wondering if somebody of 95 listening to this is thinking, oh, this is all very anti-old people.
Not at all. I mean, I think we're all in favour of making the aging process as good as we can, but that's one thing. But to say, as some people do, that we may soon be in a position, or within 50 years be in a position to abolish death, abolish natural death altogether, well, that's a very different proposition. A recent survey showed that most people, in fact, think that they would want to live until about the age of 83. Okay, doesn't mean, of course, when they get to 83, they still hold that view. This is the view they hold when they're younger, and we're assuming, of course, that they have all their faculties and so forth. I mean, many people do interesting work, lead worthwhile, wonderful lives in their 80s and 90s. Of course, they do, and that's just fantastic.
Listen, thanks for talking to us. Ian Ground, Senior Lecturer in Philosophy at Sunderland University, on the subject of whether or not we could live forever.